warm welcome to one and all who are present to the day 4 of 1 week online faculty development program on exemplary practices in teaching, learning, and evaluation of courses in computer science and information technology. This FDP is a joint effort of Vishweshwaraya Technological University's Center for PG Studies, Kalburgi, and Indian Institute of Information Technology, Allahabad. I request all the participants to mute their audio and close video. Wish you a happy learning ahead. Now I am handing over the session to Dr. Mohammad Javed, Assistant Professor, Indian Institute of Information Technology, Allahabad. Over to Javed, sir.
Dr. Javed, you are online?
Yes. Sir, is it audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Please go ahead.
A very good morning to all of you. I feel very honored to introduce today's two eminent professors from Karnataka for this exemplary session. Distinguished speaker of the session, Professor D.S. Guru, presiding chair, Professor P.S. Hiremat. Professor D.S. Guru. Sir is currently working as professor in the Department of Studies in Computer Science, University of Mysore. And Sir is a senior research scientist on sabbatical at Nemo Technologies Private Limited, Bangalore. Formerly, Sir has worked as Chairman, Admission Reformation Committee, University of Mysore, Chairman, Department of Studies in Computer Science, Manasa Gangotri, Mysore, Director, Directorate of Distance Education, University of Mysore, Director, Internal Quality Assurance Cell, University of Mysore, and Chairman, Board of Studies in Computer Science, University of Mysore. Sir completed PhD in the year 2000 from University of Mysore, and subsequently he did his postdoctoral work at PRIP Lab, Michigan State University, under Professor Anil K. Jain. Sir received many awards. Few of them are Fellow of Boys Cast, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India for the year 2005. He received Young Scientist from Government of India, recipient of first ARP award under Engineering Sciences, Vision Group of Science and Technology, Department of Science and Technology, Government of Karnataka for the year 2010. Recognized as Best Ethical Teacher at Higher Education by Rotary Mysore for the year 2011. Best Student Paper Presentation Prize in the year 1992 during Master Study, Computer Society of India, Bangalore chapter. Now, about his research background. Sir has successfully mentored 19 PhD candidates and currently supervising 6 students. Sir has published more than 80 journals and more than 280 conference papers. Sir has H index of 25 and he has citation of 2436. Sir was a member of advisory boards program committee for many international reputed conferences like ICDA 2017, ICDL 2018, ICCR, and there are many AI related conferences. Sir is presently associate editor for the reputed journal called Journal of Pattern Recognition in the Elsevier Science. Sir is a reviewer for many international journals, IEEE Transactions on Pattern Analysis and Machine Intelligence, IEEE Transaction on Image Processing, Journal of Pattern Recognition, and Neurocomputing, and many more journals. The list is very big. Sir visited abroad and delivered lectures in USA, China, Russia, and France. Sir has written textbooks. First one is Problem Solving with C, which is published by PHI in the year 2018. Sir also wrote one book on object-oriented programming with Java and also object-oriented programming with C++, which are published in the year 2017 and 2014. Sir is a life member of Computer Society of India, Indian Society for Technical Education, the Society of Statistics, Computer and Application, Indian Unit of Pattern Recognition, Artificial Intelligence, Indian Science Congress. Sir has many contributions to the society also. Sir is the founder president of Seva Samiti at his village, organizing several personality development programs for school children and medical checkup and camps for villagers, and actively involved in cultural development program. So on behalf of VTU and IIITA, I thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation as a distinguished speaker for this exemplary session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have one more eminent professor. So I am very honored to introduce today's presiding chair. Today's exemplary session, Professor P.S. Hiremed, sir, who is currently working as a professor at the Department of Computer Science, KLE Technological University, Hubli. Sir was formerly professor and chairman in the Department of Computer Science, Gulbarga University, Kalburgi. Sir completed MSc in the year 1973 and PhD in the year 1978 from Karnataka University, Dharwad. Sir is having more than 45 years of teaching experience. Sir has worked in National Institute of Technology, Surathkal, Karnataka, Coimbatore Institute of Technology, Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu, National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka University, Dharwad, Karnataka. Sir has worked as chairman, Department of Mathematics, Computer Science, member of Syndicate and Academic Council in the Gulbarga University. Sir has published more than 220 research papers and successfully guided 18 PhD candidates and 32 MPhil students. Sir has life membership from Indian Society of Theoretical and Applied Mechanics, IIT Kharagpur, Ramanujan Mathematical Society, University of Madras, Chennai, Indian Science Congress, Kolkata. Sir has research interest in image processing, pattern recognition, computational fluid dynamics, computer networks. On behalf of VTU IIITA, we thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and presiding this chair of today's exemplary session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Over to Dr. Shambulingappa, sir.
Thank you, Javed sir, for presenting the brief profiles of two distinguished professors. Now I am handing over session to presiding chair of this session, Professor P.S. Hiremed, Department of Computer Applications, KLET University, Hubli. Over to Hiremed, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Javed, for your kind words of introduction. I remember you very well whenever I met Professor Nagabhushan at the University of Mysore. I used to see you. And I thank you. I thank VTU and IIIT Allahabad for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to interact with all the honorable teachers and researchers in the area of computer science and information technology in this electronic mode. It has been a new experience for me also. And from day one, I am also participating very keenly in the proceedings of this FDP. And I feel I am also very much benefited, just like any other participant in this FDP. I think credit goes to Professor Nagabhushan for carrying all of us in this journey. And I fondly remember the help and assistance, motivation, inspiration received from Professor Nagabhushan in establishing the Department of Computer Science in Gulbarga University. And not only he also brought his colleagues, Professor Hemant Kumar and Professor Guru, who were very young at that time, but with a lot of enthusiasm and with the guidance of Professor Nagabhushan, we were able to do very well in the Gulbarga University in setting up a school of research in computer science. And as many as 30 PhDs have come out from that department. And now I am retired from that university, but the legacy will remain. And the legacy which is supported and handheld by Professor Nagbhushan. I fondly remember I acknowledge with gratitude the support I received from the University of Mysore under the supervision of Professor Nagbhushan and Professor Hemant Kumar and Professor Guru. They were very young at that time. By age I was very much senior, but I learned a lot from that team. So I always looked for University of Mysore as my benchmark, because I don't know to what extent we reached that benchmark, but we did sincere effort because that provided that landmark. And I see the same stamp of authority with which this FDP is initiated and implemented to benefit all the teachers who are working in the area of computer science. And a lot of transformation has taken place, the way the lessons are delivered, the way the evaluation has been done. So the VTU has thought of this platform for teaching, learning and evaluation in this new mode necessitated by the pandemic which we are experiencing. And I repeat the words of Professor Nagbhushan. At the end of a panel discussion, he told, now I feel like I want to become a student of all of you. So I also felt the same way, right? The way the panel discussions are taking place and the resource persons are delivering, and the transformation at teaching level and the learning level with the assistance of the technology at this point of time, I feel I should also become a student at this point of time of all these youngsters. So the delivery has been very nice. I already yesterday evening I was sharing with Professor Gadge, Professor Gadge, for that I'm also benefited in undergoing this FDP. The objectives which have been set are largely met, and we are on the right path. And we have very accomplished teachers and researchers who are taking all of us in this journey. And we have one more active researcher and accomplished teacher and dedicated teacher to deliver the talk today. And before further loss of time, I invite Dr. Guru to deliver his talk. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Javid. Shall I share my screen now?
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
Yes, sir, please.
Is it coming up now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is it visible? The
Yes,
first slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
Hope I'm audible also.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Okay, good morning, my dear colleagues, good friends, budding technocrats, respected Professor Hiremed, the chair of this session, and my mentor, Professor Nagbhushan, who has given me this opportunity to share my philosophical views on teaching and learning of the common sense in the notions of data structures and algorithms. So when Professor Nagbhushan called me up one day and said, the VTU in association with the IIIT Allahabad is planning for a FDP, which is specially designed, where there will be about 45 to 50 minutes talks, which are generally called exemplar talks, followed by panel discussion. And Guru, I want you to be one of the speakers, and you will be speaking on some topic of your interest, and specifically data structures and algorithm. I said yes, because I felt I am honored, though it was I was little hesitant, because it is a talk to address the people who have been in the field of computer science and delivering many materials on various courses on computer science to budding engineers, addressing such great teachers of engineering institutions, really very difficult. And then that's why I was a little hesitant, but still, because the Professor Nagbhushan did not request me, but he ordered me and instructed me, I simply said, yes, I am there delivering something which I feel comfortable. But today, having seen Professor Nagbhushan online, attending this seminar, probably my situation is something little different. I still am, I feel I'm scared. And it is a situation like an high school boy attending through an examination of a paper like English language, which he found to be very difficult. And while attending that examination, question paper in the examination hall, the teacher who has taught him the English grammar has come nearby and stood for a while looking at the way in which he's answering. Obviously, that boy gets scared off. So my own mentor who has taught me the course of algorithm, who has really inspired me to learn the philosophical aspects of algorithm, is also attending through this lecture. I really feel, on the other way around, very honored, respected. So the talk is on looking at the common sense in making up computers capable of inculcating a kind of intelligence, so that the computers can solve problems and help us in learning and also relearning of problems. That doesn't mean that I focus more into machine learning approaches, but my interest is to set upon why should we teach our students the course called data structures and algorithms, and especially what is the philosophy behind data structure and algorithm. What really makes these data structure and algorithms so good courses, especially for the family of computer science, and what is the common sense in the applications of this data structure and algorithm. As my understanding goes, my interest is just to touch upon the philosophical ways of teaching and learning these fundamental notions called data structures and algorithms. So if I just recollect the way in which we have understood and our teacher have taught us in our school education what is really common sense, it is something, a practical intelligence, and its application to a situation. So COVID has come all the way, we never expected, but still we are somehow managing the situation. That without getting into a laborious, without getting into a rigorous training, if I can pick up something based on my past experience, based on my previous observations, and if I can use that to see that the situation gets resolved, and that's what is called common sense. I mean, common sense is the base of everything, and if you don't have any common sense, then it doesn't matter how skilled we are and how educated we are. Our qualification doesn't matter, the skill set doesn't matter unless we are in a position to possess a certain degree of common sense to take care of the problem. Why this common sense? Obviously, the common sense improves the problem solving ability. If we are good at common sense, probably we are more intellectual, we are good at solving the problems in a realistic manner. How do we do that? How does this really help us in improving our ability in problem solving? Let me quote an example. So long ago, there was a old man who had about 17 cows, lived in a village with 3 sons. And before he passed away, he just left a will which states that the eldest one should have half of them, and the middle one should have 1/3 of them, and the youngest one should have 1/9 of those 17 cows. So these 3 sons have really started worrying and stunned about this, ratio, because the eldest son is supposed to get about 8.5. That doesn't mean that a cow has got to be cut and shared between. The middle one is supposed to get about 5.66, and the youngest one is supposed to get about 1.88. So they were really shocked and stunned how to share the 17 cows across 3 members. And fortunately, there was a wise man who is able to possess certain degree of common sense in his village, and they approached such a wise man. The moment they approached the wise man took some time, and then requested these sons to bring those 17 cows to the place of that wise man. That wise man is in such a position to understand the difficulty of the problem. That doesn't mean that he has to use so much of mathematical ability, so much of mathematical knowledge to solve this problem. And then what is simply thought of is, he also has got 1 cow, and that cow gets, he just added up into the 17. The moment that cow is added up with the 17, the number of cows become 18. And then he just requested the eldest one to take 50% of them. That turns out to be 9. And he requested the middle one to take away the 1/3 of those 18, then turned out to be 6. And youngest carried 1 9, that's called 2. And totally the 9 plus 6 plus 2 happens to be 17. And still 1 is left out. That is supposed to be the wise man's cow. So wise man has taken back his cow. But still these youngsters, these people, these 3 people are happy in satisfying the ratio mentioned by his father in his will. So that's how this common sense of this wise man has really worked in getting this problem in reality solved. To possess certain degree of common sense, probably we are quite good at taking up the problem and observing the nature of the problem. We are going to observe the nature, and we are going to recollect our past experience in solving similar, if not exactly the same, similar kind of problems in our life. And based on that observation, what really matters is common sense tries to pursue that, the knowledge out of that observations, and that pursued knowledge gets reposited in the brain of a human, and that repository is what is called a data structure. And the moment a problem P is given, this common sense works like an algorithm and deploys, this data structures on that, and then making use of this data structure as an inference engine and tries to get a solution to the problem P. Okay, then what really matters is the first is a perception of what you are going to handle. So this wise man could pursue the problem and 17 cows, which are exactly like data elements in our computer science. And once you are good at the perception, then you will end up with some knowledge derived out of it, and that derived knowledge has got to be preserved in one or the other way in the memory of a computer. Then you can think of employing a suitable algorithm on that, and that leads to the problem solving. Look, dear friends, I'm not interested in solving problem manually sitting through and taking up a piece of paper and a pencil and working on solutions for the problem, because I'm a computer scientist, love to get the problem of my interest solved with the support of a computer, with the aid of a computer, and that's what is called problem solving. Solving problem is different, and problem solving, is different. Problem solving is to make computers. The problem solving is somehow to get the solution to the problem of my interest with the support of somebody. I want solution, but I don't want to sit and work for the solution. Instead, I expect somebody to help me out. So that's what is called problem solving. In problem solving, especially in computers, involves basically majorly 4 steps. One is the design of algorithm. Let it be of any problem of understanding whether the given number is a prime or not, problem of deciding whether a quadratic equation has a complex root or not, irrespective of it. Even it could be as complex as problem of recognizing faces of individuals. Let it be of any problem to be tackled on computers, then basically majorly we have 4 steps. One is design of algorithms. Once you have come out with possibly many ways of solving a problem, multiple algorithms, then we are going to choose one which appears to be both effective and efficient. And for the purpose of making such a decision, we are going to get into what is called analysis of algorithm, analyze algorithm for various factors, various parameters, and look at the goodness of it, the badness of it, and then decide which algorithm is superior to what, under what circumstances. Can I make up such a decision? And that is what is the field called analysis of algorithms. Once you have selectively chosen the best algorithm across all available, then you're going to go for coding with the support of a suitable programming language, coding of algorithm, and then we go for executing that algorithm so that the input can be given and output can be generated. Look at any problem in computer science, maybe AI problem, maybe a computer networking problem, maybe a communication problem, whatever it is, it involves basically these 4 steps. Anybody who claims that his life is dedicated for the field of computer science, either he has to work on design aspects or on analysis aspects or on coding aspect or on execution aspect of algorithm. As long as I am dedicated to the field of computer science, I get to dedicate my life only for study of algorithm. I don't do anything. If I am a professor of computer science, I don't do anything except understanding algorithm from different perception, from different angles, from different dimensions, keeping many parameters associated with algorithm. And such a study of algorithm thus can be called as computer science. Computer science is nothing other than a study of algorithm. Look, what is then this algorithm, right? Obviously, this algorithm deserves significant way of defining and understanding that. Thorough understanding of algorithm perhaps helps us in understanding the way in which we can effectively solve the problem. Look, any algorithm has got 2 spaces associated with that. One is called an input space, the input space of some dimension, let's say n in number, and output space maybe a y space of k dimension. So the algorithm is, from a mathematics point of view, it appears to be a transformation function. When a mathematician looks at this algorithm A, the algorithm A doesn't do anything except taking me from the space X to a space Y. I mean, given is some number of parameters of this X space, so it gets mapped onto a corresponding Y elements in this. And such a transformation function is what is called an algorithm. Look, algorithm, of course, when it's given to a computer scientist, then we are going to understand the nature of this X space and Y space, right? What type of data are these here? What is the dimension of this space? N, right? In each dimension, what should be the type of the data element? Is that only integer space? Is that a real space? Is that a complex space, right? What should be the size of that? What is the length of each dimension in this X space and as well as in Y space, right? So let me just narrate this, simple understanding with the support of an example called quadratic equation solver. Given is a quadratic equation, ax square plus bx plus c equal to 0. The job is to find what is the value of x. Upon its substitution with this equation, the equation becomes satisfied, right? So that obviously we have studied in our high school that this quadratic equation being of degree 2 polynomial, we have 2 roots, right? How do we solve it? Then these a, b, c are the parameters. What is input to this algorithm called quadratic equation solver? Those are the 3 elements, a, b, c. Then you can imagine that whatever the triplet that you give it as an input is supposed to be a point in 3-dimensional space. I mean, imagine that the input space is of 3 dimensions. There is an axis A, there is an axis B, and there is an axis C. Any point in this 3D plane is supposed to be the input for this algorithm. Then that algorithm is expected to generate 2 roots. Let me call it as x1 and x2. I mean, there is a point in this 2D plane. Then the algorithm called quadratic equation solver doesn't do except mapping of this triplet onto a plane, right? This triplet onto a pair. So ABC, a triplet, is getting mapped onto a pair of 2 values called x1 and x2. So then the question now is, of course, the mathematicians really intellectual, personalities really good at working in imaginary space. This ABC, the 3D space could be as big as they can imagine, could be infinite. So this output space of x1, x2 plane, it could also be of infinite in size. But unfortunately, the moment you think of concretizing this conceptualization of solving quadratic equation with the support of computers, we have to go for restricting ourselves to a finite domain. I cannot think of this input space to be a infinite space. I can think of only this input space to be a finite, because however big our computer is, but the computer has got only a limited number of memory. I mean, the number of memory locations available in so big supercomputer is still a finite, because that finiteness property of a computing system, I get to imagine that this input space is finite. The question is now, what is the range for A? 0 to some value. What is the range for B? 0 to some value. Or should I allow this A to also to think of negative value, right? Look, the moment it is given to a computer scientist has to work with certain limitations, has to work with certain axioms, has to work with certain conditions, and such restrictions bound us to think of some finite representation to this. Then modulo class committee picture. Then suppose I say that A can range only from 0 to 256, then A is given a byte representation. All right, if A is also allowed to take a negative value, then that byte representation has got to be shared. I mean, 256 possible instances of that A have got to be shared, 50% negative and 50% for positive. Then it ranges from some a 50 minus side and a 50 on the other side. Then the 2's complements come into picture, data representation of integer, data representation of real. It all depends on the type that we are handling. Are we handling integer? Are we handling real number? Are we handling complex number? Every programming language associates a finite number of bits in order to represent any variable for that matter. Hope you understand, right? Though the mathematician can think of infinite space, but computer scientists cannot think of, because computer is a finite system. Then how do I validate my algorithm? Look, this, though it is a finite, but the number of elements present in this finite, a 3-dimensional space is infinite, right? So though the size of this cube is finite, but the number of points, the number of elements, the number of possible triplets available being a member of that cube is infinite. Then in order to validate the superiority, in order to validate the effectiveness of this algorithm, one has to run this algorithm for all possible points in this finite space, but it's practically not possible. Then I have to selectively choose only a couple of them which are representative of entire space. I got to choose some samples in this space of triplets. So I'll choose collectively, selectively chosen triplets and run the algorithm and see whether that algorithm produces the expected result or not. Then how do I choose? Then I can make my algorithm so efficient. I can make my algorithm so effective. I can certain that algorithm works well for all possible inputs as long as I stick on to the well-defined type, maybe integer, maybe real. It's only when I choose the samples accurately. How do I choose sample? Then I got to end up understanding not only the triplet, I got to understand how is that triplet related to other triplets in the space. If I can explore the relationship existing among the data elements present in this 3D space, so that those data elements could be clustered together, and from each cluster I can choose a cluster representative in order to validate, then I can make sure that I can certify that this algorithm works with only finite effort. And that's what is called testing complexity. Look, dear friends, if at all you want to enjoy solving a problem with the support of algorithm, so probably I recollect that Professor Nagbhushan touched upon interesting searching algorithm which he called it as intelligent search. So given is indices of an array and where the elements have been stored, and I just got them sorted, and then a regression line is fed and the parameter of the regression line is stored, so that I can, whenever I want to search for a data element, then I just go in reverse like an hashing function. Look, that algorithm called search algorithm becomes intelligent only when you understood that the data elements could be sorted out, and the data elements can be fit into a regression line, and regression line parameters could be extracted and reposited. Look, dear friends, the algorithm can be made so efficient, the algorithm can be made so intelligent, not because of the algorithm property, but because of the data structure. Look, one has got to understand not only the piece of data element to be handled, in addition to understanding the data, we are going to understand the relationship existing among the data. Once we are good at the relationship existing among the data element, probably I can exploit the beauty of the structuring of this entire data space for the betterment of algorithm. Probably the good example could be a medical shop. When a doctor has given you a prescription, you go with a prescription and hand over to a shopman. The shopman just simply reads the medicine name and then walks back to the respective self and picks it up. How does he become so intelligent and quickly accessing that medicine of your interest? Because he has understood what are all the materials available there, which are all the medicines available there. It's not that he has understood only the individual piece of medicine. He has also understood that which are all the medicines which are related, and all medicines which are, paracetamol are put in one shelf, all medicines which are antibiotic are put in other shelf, all medicines which are called syrups are put in yet another shelf, and such an arrangement based on the relationship existing among the data element is what is called study of data and study of the relationship. And the study of data and the relationship indeed makes any algorithm intelligent. Look, dear friends, the first one we are going to make study of data. Given is an input space, then we are going to understand every piece of data, and that gives us a description of data, which I call it as a domain. And it's not good enough to just make a study of data. I got to get into the study of relationship among data. So once I explore the relationship among data, then I can define set of operations on that. Look, 3 plus 5 gives 8. Then my interest is not to add up 3 and 5. My interest is to know how are these triplet, how are these 3 elements, 3, 5, and 8 are related. Then I end up understanding that 3 and 5, when I added up, generate 8. I mean, 8 is a function of 3 and 5. So that's what is called study of relationship. And study of relationship or exploration of relationship among data elements would help us in defining set of operations, and which can be realized in the form of algorithms. Algorithms, as I said, nothing other than functions, right? We have domain element, and based on that we have functions which operate on the domain element. While operating these functions, we are governed by certain rules, and those rules are called axioms. And putting these three together, data domain, data and functions and axioms, is what is our perception of the problem. Once this perception is done, then I made a study of data, relationship, and representation. Look, though my interest is to study algorithms, but I end up studying data, relationship, and their representation in the main of memory of computer. And that's computer science can better be defined as a study of data, relationship, and representation. And because of this study, obviously I end up with some knowledge extracted, and that is what is called a wisdom. My wiseness on that problem to be handled, and that knowledge has got to be preserved by the use of conceptual set of tools, right? Somehow I got to preserve it. Somewhere I got to preserve it, right? And for the purpose of preservation, I go with certain techniques, certain tools, and such tools in case preserve my knowledge in the primary memory, which is for a short time period. Then I call it as data structure. If these tools would help us in preserving my knowledge extracted out of my study on data and the relationship on a secondary device for a long time, more or less permanent in nature, on a large application, then I call it as a file structure or a data model. I mean, data structure or a file structure, data model, all are on almost the same platform, but on different instances, like a primary and a secondary, and it's for a short time, it's for a long time, and a large collection. So basically, data structures or file structure, data model have got majorly data domain and set of operations to be performed on that. While doing set of operations on the data domain, I get to meet certain rules, certain axioms, and those are called conditions. So this is a triplet called DFA is what is called data structure. Let's consider a simple example. Given is a data collection D, which has got about 7 data elements like Dasharatha, Rama, Bharata, Lakshmana, Shatrughna, Kusha, Lava. My interest is to understand these pieces of data. How do I understand these pieces of data? Being a man of computer science, I love to study this data as strings of characters. Dasharatha is a string of some number of characters. Rama is a string of 4 characters. Bharata is a string of 7 characters, and so on. I just want to make a study or understand these pieces of data as if they are the strings of characters. The moment I the moment I attempt towards understanding these data elements as strings of characters, I end up defining this function. Look, what is that? Given is a string, Dasharatha. What is the length of it? It gives me the integer. Look, length is now a function. Length is now an algorithm. When I'm trying to understand the study, I'm trying to understand the data element in terms of functions on it, right? Then number of vowels. How many vowels that Dasharatha the string has? Any number. What is the frequency of occurrence of A in Dasharatha? What is the frequency of occurrence of A in Rama? That's what is called a frequency function, right? It gives me an integer. What is the first letter in S? That's a character. What is the last letter in S? That's another character, right? Look at here, when I attempt to study the data, I end up defining these functions. What are these functions after all? These functions are nothing but algorithms. Look, I am trying to make a study on how well I can think of structuring these pieces of data element in the memory of a computer. My interest is to define a data structure on this domain D, but while defining a data structure on the domain D, I end up generating algorithms. Look at, that's quite interesting, relationship between data structure and algorithm. And it's not good enough to end up with only study on data. I got to explore relationship among data. Then my question is, how is this Dasharatha, a string related to Rama? What is the edit distance? If I want to convert the Rama, the string, to a string called Dasharatha, how many effort, a string, character operation I have to do it? I can define edit distance. Is that Dasharatha smaller than Rama? The string I'm talking about, right? So chronologically, can I work out a less than relationship? Given are the 2 strings, I have to compare them on the other end. Then if it is S1 less than S2, then it ends up with a true value, otherwise a false. Then output of that function is a Boolean. Or can I concatenate 2 strings, S1 and S2? Yes, generating another string S3. Concatenation operation. Substring. Is that a given string Rama, a substring of Dasharatha? I'd like to check, no? So when I go with understanding the relationship among these 7 elements, then I define another set of algorithm, another set of functions. So these, together help us in tying up. The moment I understand these data and the relationship, I go for sorting them, putting them in a dictionary form. Bharata comes first, Dasharatha comes next, Kusha comes next, Lakshmana comes next, etc. and so on. I just end up with sorting of those and storing them in array. Look, that defines what is called a data structure array. On the other hand, somebody who is familiar with Ramayana, perhaps the moment he looks at these data elements, may perceive these are the characters in Ramayana. The moment you perceive these are the characteristics in Ramayana, then the length of the Dasharatha, number of vowels in the Dasharatha, frequency of occurrence of a character in the Dasharatha automatically lose their identity. Then the gender, given is a person in Ramayana, any of this element, what is the gender? Is that a male? Is a female? What is the age of that person? Young. Look at the functions which I thought of here in case of a string of characters are not applicable here, and the function that now I am thinking of qualification of a person Rama doesn't hold good in case of string of characters. Look, only the perception difference, but the domain elements are still same. I'm trying to understand the domain elements as the characters in great Ramayana. Then when I attempt to understand the relationship among these persons in Ramayana, I end up defining the father of relationship, right? The father of is a function. Given are the two parameters, Rama and Dasharatha. I want to know whether Dasharatha is a father of Rama or not. Then it ends up true, otherwise false. Mother of, brother of, he is sibling, a Lava, a sibling of Lakshmana, yes or no? Look at the way in which I am exploring the relationship among these same pieces of data elements is totally different when compared to here earlier, because earlier I just looked at them as strings of characters. Now I am looking at them as the persons in Ramayana. The moment I end up understanding this way, the moment I end up relating these data elements in this manner of this, with the support of these algorithms called father of, mother of, age, qualification, then I end up with a different structure called a tree structure, right? So I end up with a different structure called tree structure. This is a tree, whereas earlier it was an array. And if I continue explaining with another way of looking at these data elements, if I understand these data elements as only the names of cities, because we love our gods, we respect gods. So in India, we may call certain cities as Dasharatha, one city by Rama, another city by Bharata, and so on. No? So then these could be the names of cities. If these are the names of city, then I have to give a set of functions, right? What is the population in CTC, right? How many males are there in the CTC? How many females are there in the CTC? Is that a district headquarters? Is that a capital of that state, right? So look at these functions are the way in which I am now understanding the data is totally different. The algorithms which are associated with this piece of data, the moment these data are seen to be the names of cities, totally different. So then you also explore relationship. Is that C1 connected to C2? Mysore is connected to Bangalore. Is it by air, by road, right? By train, and so on. So distance between two cities. What is the distance between Mysore and Bangalore? C1 and C2. It will be so many kilometers, right? So is that P1 city, popular, more population as when compared to P2 and so on. Look at. So these are the set of functions which I am interested in the moment I understand them as the names of cities. So when such an understanding is done, such a study is made, I end up with a different, altogether a different way of structuring of these data elements, and that turns out to be a graph. Look, dear friends, data domain elements are same, but only my perceptions are different. My domain applications are totally different. I got to exploit the beauty of this domain for the purpose of string of characters, and I got to exploit the beauty of this domain element for the purpose of Ramayana ontology. Then I may have to look at them as cities. Then automatically the way in which I end up tying up those data elements, the way in which I just structure the data element becomes totally different. I mean, data structure is not on its own can be defined. It has got to be defined with associated set of operations, associated with set of algorithms or functions, right? Look at that's the beauty of algorithms in defining well the data structure. Look, a stack. What is after all a stack? You must have learned that an ordered list of similar data elements in which both insertion and deletion operations are defined at one end only. That end is called top end. Right? What do you mean by one and only one end? I mean only just like a lady wearing bangles. This end is open, this end is not open, right? So then you have to do both insertion and deletion of bangles at the same end, Then suppose if I push a bangle and then suddenly pop off a bangle, I'm supposed to get back the same bangle. That is the condition to be met out. Okay? I mean, I'm explaining what is the importance of axioms in defining. Whatever you mentioned that in English, the operations called insertion and deletions both are defined at the same end. How do I make sure that they take place at the same end? Then I got to work out an axiom. I got to work out an assertion. I got to work out a condition. This condition called pop push s of x is supposed to give you x back. If you push an x into the stack, yes, and immediately if we go for popping of an element from that stack, then you're supposed to get back the same element that you pushed in. I mean, that maintains what you call it as lost in first out behavior. That lost in first out is the one which is recently inserted is supposed to be popped off, right? How is that maintained more formally I can put it as an axiom, a pop off, push off s comma x equal to x. So if I push a data x and then look at the top, then I got to see the same x, If I see something other than x, then either push is not taken place at the top end of the stack, or top operation is not being performed well. Either there is something wrong while implementing push operation or while realizing top operation. Look, top and push of any x into s supposed to give you x back. So the moment I push an element into the stack, and if I look at the isEmpty function, the isEmpty function is expected to give me false. If it says true, then realization of either this or this is really wrong, right? Similarly, if I look at isFullness of a stack after popping an element, then that isFull is supposed to give me the false. Look at, these are certain conditions to be satisfied by these operations called push and pop operations. And similarly, on the other hand, look at the queue. As the name itself indicates, queue, where Q is the first letter. So the one who is in the front is given the priority. That's what is called a queue. An ordered list of similar data elements in which insertion is defined at one end called rear end, and the deletion is defined at other end called front end. I mean, insertion is defined at one end, deletion is defined at the other end. These are called rear and front end. Look, if I insert an element X and look at the rear, I got to see the same element X. That's the first condition here. And if I look at the front, and if I also attempt to delete, then both should give me the same value. Whatever which is front of you is supposed to be the outcome of deletion of Q. That maintains what is called a first in, a first out manner. These two conditions are responsible in maintaining the constraint that a first in, first out. So whereas here is a last in, first out. Look at the stack is an ordered list. Q is also an ordered list of data elements, similar data elements. But if you don't do the insertion and deletion, if these are prohibited, then it's simply called an array. Array is a data structure where no insertion and deletion can take place because it's of fixed size. Whereas when you attempt to do insertion and deletion, if you allow the insertion and deletion to take place in random manner, then it is not a stack, it is a stock. S-T-O-C-K, stock of data element. The stock can become stack only when you enforce these axioms on those operations. Look, in the case of a queue, the moment you insert an element into queue, and if you look at the isEmpty function is supposed to say false. It is not empty because insertion has taken place. At least there is one element. And if you go with the deleting an element and then checking with full, because you just have taken out an element from the queue, the queue cannot be full now. There is at least one location for the next data. Hence, isFull should say false. But unfortunately, when you attempt to realize the queue based on linear structure, then this axioms cannot be met out. Then we think of circular queue. Dear friends, circular queue concept is only a notion. There is nothing like a queue called circular, because queue is basically a linear structure. Being a linear structure, how can you expect it to be a circular? But while implementing these parameters which keep track of front and a rear element, F and R pointers, and those will go not in linear incremental order, but in a modulo operation. And such an alternative realization is supposed to be what is called exact realization of Q. There is nothing like a circular Q as a data structure. Circular Q is only an alternative way of realizing Q data structure, maintaining these axioms. Strictly speaking, in my opinion, circular Q implementation is the actual implementation of any Q data structure for that matter. Hope with this example, you appreciate understanding what is the importance, what are the significance of axioms while defining a data structure. The moment you define the data structure, then what really comes into picture is how to accommodate in the memory of the computer. That the physical location where you accommodate your understanding, your knowledge derived out of study of data, and the relationship is what is called storage structure. Storage structure is a tangible. Storage structure is something physical, whereas data structure is a concept. Data structure is more a conceptual entity, whereas storage structure is a concrete entity called a physical entity. So there are two basically different types of storage structure. One is sequential based, allocation. Array could be a storage structure, matrix could be a but that supports direct access because they work based on computed addressing. Whatever the storage structure which supports computed addressing would support, direct accessing. But on the other hand, an alternative realization is what is called linked allocation. I don't have a contiguous memory, enough number of memory locations. Then I have to piecewisely choose and then link them up. And such a storage structure is what is called linked allocation. So, dear colleagues, most of the times we carry an illusion that linked lists are altogether a different data structures. No, linked lists, strictly speaking, they are the alternate ways of realizing same data structure called stack. Stack can be implemented on a sequential based allocation. Stack can be realized on linked allocation. Queue can be realized on either sequential or on linked allocation. I mean, like travel, journey is my, interest. but journey can be by road, journey can be by rail. So these are the two alternate ways of realization. Linked list itself is not a data structure. Linked list is only a storage structure for a data structure of your interest. So it could be a singly linked list, could be a doubly linked list, whatnot. But these are linked lists, but doesn't support direct access because we are going to access through pointers. And whenever you end up accessing through pointers, then obviously you are going to follow a sequential access of data. So what we understood is now a data structure is something which is not alone, alone as a definition. The data structure can be better described, the data structure can be better understood, the data structure can be better defined only with what is called functions, which are nothing but algorithms, and conditions called axioms. I mean, look, is that algorithm superior or is the data structure superior? I cannot answer because definition of data structure obviously requires algorithm. But on the other hand, look at this algorithm called binary search. When can you apply, when can you work with a binary search? Only when the associated data structure is sorted. Unless you got your array of data elements sorted, the binary search has no significance. I'm given a dictionary because I know how to search for a word in a dictionary. Then I enjoy employing dictionary search on a dictionary. Instead of giving me the dictionary, if I am given what is called a textbook where the elements are not sorted out, in spite of I am so good at dictionary search, I cannot use it on a textbook, right? So then my ability in, of expressing my goodness in searching for a word in a dictionary is of no significance unless I'm given a corresponding, a more suitable data structure called dictionary. So on the other hand, I have a dictionary. I just give it a second standard student who doesn't know how to search for a data element in a dictionary, right? Even if you give a dictionary to that second standard student, the student will go in a sequential order for, searching for a data element. So that's, algorithm can carry some significance. Algorithm can carry some meaning only when there is a data structure. And data structure can be stated to be effective, can be stated to be so useful only when there is a corresponding intelligent algorithm. Hence, friends, neither algorithm nor data structure alone has meaning without the other. Both of them have got to be taken in parallel, both of them have got to be studied together, and both of them have got to be integrated together, have got to be put together, have got to be associated together. It both together defines a family called computer science. A computer science is a family which is a combination of data structure and algorithm. Data structure plus algorithm defines what is called computer science, and there shall not be any divorce for these two called data structures and algorithm. Look, on the other hand, data models, databases we talk about, right? I made a study of data. While making a study of data, keeping in mind large, collection of data, then I go for grouping of similar entities together. I employ a clustering strategy, a clustering algorithm. The moment I employ a clustering algorithm, all entities, similar entities get grouped together, which we call them as entity types. Once entity types are generated and described well in terms of some semantically associated with attributes, then we go for exploring relationship between entity types. A many, a many-one, one-to-one, and so on. Once this relationship, the degree of relationship existing between two entity types are studied well, explored well, then we go for representation. Earlier, we used to work with graph representation. Before 1970s, we used to work with graph representation, which were called network model, a tree representation, an evolved version of graph representation, right? Hierarchical model. But unfortunately, these were pointer-based. A physical location where data element is recorded matters a lot, and operations are really complex to realize. And in 1970s, God grace that EF code has given a new look, given a new dimension to the database technology, and he introduced that any piece of data can be represented as a relation. Give me any piece of data that can be represented as a relation. A relation is nothing but a Cartesian product of two or many sets, right? So that relation representation give rise to the birth of what is called a relational data model, which is a choice of, which is a model of today's choice. So relational data model is free from pointers. That's an advantage of it. And it is not an object oriented, it is not a physical location based, it's a value oriented. And it works based on set theoretical operation like, projection, selection, Cartesian product of two sets, union of relations. And because of these operations on relational database have been defined in terms of set theoretical background, the nesting of queries is possible because output of one set operation is another set, You do any set operation, the output of set operation is another set, the output can be injected as input for the next operation. And because of that nature, nesting of queries becomes possible. And that has really made us so good in solving any kind of queries on relational data model. But on the other hand, in case of network model and hierarchical model, look, because pointer based, the designer has to imagine what are the possible expected queries in future, and based on that he must have designed the model. But on the other hand, in the case of relational model, you need not have to worry about what could be the possible future queries. You just go for giving it a better design and effective design, so that the nesting of queries and simple set theoretical operations will make you so good in extracting whatever the data you want, in case if it is available in the database. So tabular storage, I mean a table representation, right? It supports data independence like anything. So, I mean, what really matters in relational database is a powerful design. What is a design? It's a collection of tables. Now, my question is, how many tables I got to have? How many schemas I got to have? Once I decided that there should be 10 tables, then what is the degree of each table? How many columns should be there in the table? That's what is called arities. And once you have stated that table 1 should have 3 attributes, which are those 3 attributes? Is that the name, address, and qualification? Is that the name, telephone, and qualification? Which are the 3 attributes to be in the first table? Which are the attributes to be in the second table, and so on? Look, answering these fundamental questions, number of relation schemes in the relational database, and arity of each relation scheme in the relation database, and identifying the attributes in each table, in each relation, is what is called the problem of relation database design. And the design calls upon a replacement of a schema with n number of attributes. Let me come to this. So, replacement of a schema with n number of attributes by a collection of subschemas, m in number, where each scheme has got n1 and n2, etc., nm number of attributes respectively. And it's a process of decomposition, a decomposing R into m number of sub-relations, so that union of these relations give back to this, a natural join of these relations give back to this. And at the time of decomposition, I should make sure that there should not be any loss of information at all. Loss doesn't mean that you can add up something so that then when you naturally join these back, you'll get something which is a superset of n, superset of R. That should not happen. The moment you join them back naturally, then you are supposed to exactly get this R. Then I say the decomposition is a lossless join decomposition. Otherwise, the decomposition is not a lossless join, it's a lossy, join decomposition. Look at, when do we say that this replacement of R by this collection is a better replacement? Then we have to define what is called normal forms, which speaks about the goodness of a database. Then we have 1NF, 2NF, 3NF, Boscott normal form, 4NF, 5th NF, right? And these normal forms, I mean, this process of decomposition of a relation into a sub-relation so that they are in the expected normal forms is completely driven by data dependence. Look, dear friends, if you want to really accomplish a better database design, you have got to understand not the data alone, but the dependency between data. Is that dependency exists between 2 attributes x and a y, a functional, a multi-valued, a join, right? You have to understand how are these attributes related. One is understanding the attribute itself. What does the name mean? What is the domain elements of the name attribute? What does the address mean? What is the domain element of this address attribute? How is this address related to this name? How is this name related to gender? How is this gender related to address? These are what is called data dependency. Look, this process of decomposition is completely governed by data dependency. The data dependency can be worked out only when you explore relationship among the attributes. Again, study of data and their relationship. So once you make such data dependencies, then these 4 are driven by functional dependencies, and this 4NF is driven by multi-valued data dependency. This 5th NF is driven by a joint dependency. Then how do I obtain a relation R in general to sub-relations which are in 3NF? How do I get this R converted into relations which are in BCNF? Basically, it's a clustering approach. So 3NF appears to me like a partition clustering. Given are the n number of attributes and given is a set of functional dependency, you can partition the functional dependency based on their likelihoodness on LHS. And if you, the moment you just cluster this functional dependency into m number of clusters, so that in each cluster all functional dependency have got identical LHS, work out the union of these attributes, that defines one relation schema. Do the same thing on second cluster, that gives you another schema, and so on. I mean, basically this 3NF notion is a partition clustering. But on the other hand, if you want to decompose this relation into a collection which is in BCNF, then you have got to go for a hierarchical way of devising. Take up the entire schema and find out a functional dependency which violates BCNF property, and take up that functional dependency. See that that functional dependency drives. Look, in clustering algorithm, the proximity between data element drives a similarity, a dissimilarity, Euclidean distance. That drives in conventional clustering. But here in BCNF, decomposition, the functional dependency is the proximity. That functional dependency having x gives a, then work out union of x and a, decompose that r into xa and r minus a. Then r minus a, again look for the satisfaction property of BCNF. If not, take up the next functional dependency which really violates the BCNF property, decompose it. I mean, what do? I start with all n attributes, and then I just go on decomposing into two, r minus a xa, r minus a xa, and so on and so on. And at each stage I just split it into two binary split, and that's what is called hierarchical. It builds up hierarchy in decomposition, and it's not that moves from a single attributes to all attributes, but it moves from all attributes to individual schema. It's a divisive clustering basically, right? If you are strong at partition clustering, and if you are good at hierarchical devising clustering, probably you are equally strong at 3NF decomposition and the philosophy of BCNF decomposition, so that when does this partition clustering leads to dependency preserving decomposition and also lossless joint decomposition, and when does this hierarchical divisive clustering approach preserves all data dependency and also maintains lossless joint property. Look, these are the two things we are going to maintain while coming out with the effective relation database. Look, I have an example for a data structure now. It's a set representation. What is my problem? The problem is so simple. I have a gallery of photos. In each photo, let's assume that there are n number of photos, photo S1, S2, etc., sample Sn. And in photo 1, there are k number of people present in myself, be Dr. Javed, Dr. Hiremet sir, and so on. There are k number of people present, and each person is identified and labeled by their names. So given is such a collection of names, a set of names of this photo. Similarly, second photo, there are n number of people. Third photo, there could be some x number of people. Last photo, there could be only 2 persons. So it is what is my data collected. I got to understand this data. How did I understand this data? As every photo is understood in terms of names of people present in the photo. Once this data have been understood, then I try to understand mutually then. How is S1 and S2 related? How S1 is related to S3? How is S3 related to S4 and so on? The moment I attempt to understand the relationship existing among these photos, then I understand that there is a person P1 who is present in this list of photos. I can reverse back, I work out an inverted list. What is that inverted list? Given is a person, which are all the photos where he is present. Given is a person P2, which are all the photos where he is present, right? Look at from this data collected, my study on data and relationship among these photos leads to this way of representation. This is what is called list representation. Now, given is a name of a person, I get to know which are all the photos where this person is there. You just sort them, these list according to alphabetical order, and fetch that P3, get the list of photos. If you understand that list is so used, and even binary search is not that effective, or linear search is not that acceptable, then you can think of going with the indexing representation. Take up this list of people, and the photos, The moment you understand the data structure and make the data structure so effective, your algorithm becomes so simple. The simplicity of the algorithm is not its property. The simplicity of the algorithm is the property of the associated data set. If I'm so good at in solving problem, if I'm so intelligent in attending the problem quickly, that means that my storage, my repository of knowledge is so strong. So the data set, the effectiveness of the data set defines what is called the complexity of the algorithm, the simplicity of the algorithm. It all depends on the data structures used. The intellectual ability of an algorithm, it all depends on the data structures, right? Okay. In machine learning, what we do, it is what is called very, very hot area today, keeping in mind the classification. If I attempt to learn my data for the purpose of classification, probably must have heard of decision tree ensemble, support vector machine, least square regression. What do we do after all? We try to estimate the parameters of the line separating two classes. We are trying to understand the attributes which are capable of bifurcating the population into subpopulations so that my search becomes easier, right? So in case of decision tree, in case of support vector, in case of least square regression, I would estimate the parameters of this line. I mean, study the data, understand the relationship, and try to best fit a line, extract the parameters, keep them in the data structure. The computation of those parameters, nothing but a data structural aspect. Once those parameters are computed and recorded, then employing a classification is what is called an algorithmic problem. So it's a classical machine learning approaches. In case of a deep learning, what do we do? Even as a sample, we subject it for multi-layer, convolutions. The moment you subject it to multi-layer convolution, each, convolution, there is a set of parameters to be defined, right? So that's what we do. I mean, finally, in machine learning application, our job is to compute this. This is what is called W into X gives me the Y. X is an input, Y is an output. Look, W is a weight matrix. Ultimate job of any machine learning is to compute this weight matrix. What is this weight matrix after all? It is the outcome of my study on the data, not only on the study of data, but also on the relationship among the data. And that study would help me, would richen, that study has made me so rich in computing the values for so high dimensional parameters so that could be accommodated in a weight matrix. And the moment that weight matrix is computed, the job becomes so simple because I take up this input vector, I just do this operation. What is this operation? That's an algorithm, right? So I do this operation on that weight matrix using this input, getting my output Y expected. I mean, look, dear friends, this weight matrix is a data structure. This operation is an algorithm. If you concatenate them with the support of addition operation, I mean, if you feel that they are together, they are bound together to define what is called problem in computer science, solution to the computer science. The computer science can better be abbreviated as CS, and that CS is what is called common sense. If you understand, dear, we all being teachers should not teach data structure as just simply a method of arranging data element either with logical relationship or with mathematical. No, nothing. You just narrate the story of this, right? How is this data structure related to our real life examples? How are these algorithms with which we are really working unknowingly in our real life from day morning to day evening, right? So if we can understand that common sense in handling the problem in real situation, perhaps we become so good at inculcating this common sense into computers so that computers start exhibiting such common sense. So then we have a computer science. Friends, we have to teach our students the notions of data structures algorithm not as a course, but as their mother tongue. The students should pick up these concepts of data structures and algorithm as if they are picking up their mother tongue. The moment you make them learning of data structures and algorithm, don't allow them to learn data structures and algorithm. Please teach them how to learning data structures and algorithm. Perhaps that would help them in picking up these notions of data structures and algorithm as if they are picking up their mother tongue. And that's the end of what is called learning of computer science, called common sense. See, there is always a distance between two living things, as it is unlikely that any two living beings are alike. It is true even with artificially made objects. However, they are visually alike. Learning and preserving the discriminative data for subsequent classification, even in case of twins, at least mother is capable of distinguishing, capable of differentiating those two kids. So learning and preserving that discriminative data for subsequent classification essentially requires data structure, a DS, initials of my name, and algorithm let's all go together to teach our students the common sense which does this in general called computer science. Thank you, one and all. Thank you very much. Hope I am on right time. I took about 45 minutes.
Thank you.
Remove the share.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Guru.
For making a point that common sense is common through your illustration. Now I request.
Stop sharing.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor Guru, for a very lucid presentation on data structures and algorithms. And you have emphatically made the point that algorithm is the essence of computer science, and data structure in turn is the essence of algorithms. Very nicely narrated. Very nice examples you have given, which drive home the point. And you also made a point, the importance of the understanding of the data, so that we will be able to build meaningful relationship among them, which will give rise to the pertinent data structures that are necessary in handling that kind of problem. And once we identify the data structures, then we'll come out with the algorithms which will operate on the data structures. And also you easily connected to the secondary storage of the data where you dealt with the database. The illustrations were also very impactful. And this is a time for asking questions. And before that, I have my own question, which I would like to put to you. The question is, we hear a lot about big data analytics and the size of the data which is stored in the secondary memory. Since it is very used and gives rise to many issues in accessing that kind of data, and then process and come out with some inferences. So that is well understood. Now, coming back to the data structures, now the machines have got huge memory. Main memory itself is very huge. And data structures are resident in the main memory, primary memory. So naturally, since it allows more room space, data structures are also huge now. Now the question I want to ask is whether the algorithms which are thought of, designed so far, still continue to remain efficient in large size data structures, given that the machines have got huge primary memory. Or we need some modification in the existing algorithms in which handle data structures, and the data structure size is huge.
Yes.
So in terms of access, in terms of the operation we need to do, whether they consume more time, and if we want to make them efficient memory wise and time wise, what modification needs to be done?
So at one end, you can think of improving the complexity, looking at the complexity of the algorithm which you have to operate on the data collection. And that complexity of the algorithm can be reduced with the support of some edge computing. I mean, before you really deploy actual algorithm of your interest on the large corpus, can you think of selectively choosing only the portion of that interest? Right? Look, I'm looking for a pen of my interest, but probably earlier I used to work with only one pen. Probably now I'm working with multiple pens. then if I can keep my pens well organized, then I can still continue to be working as efficient as I was earlier. Right? If I don't go with the effective way of organizing of these pens, obviously I have to have some supplementary, assistant so that somebody will help me out in tuning up. Looking at my dress code, probably I may look at some pen of color which matches with my dress code. Then there could be some edge computing operation which gets me the data filtered out. Right? So at one end, hardware infrastructure is, efficiency of the hardware infrastructure, CPU computation, CPU have gone now. We are talking about GPUs, right? So GPU is also going out now. We are talking about the FPGA, right? So that's hardware implementation. But still, the complexity of the algorithm, quadratic continues to be quadratic. Sorting, you cannot think of making it a linear. So the best sorting could be of n log n, right? But now the problem is on scalability. Earlier we used to employ merge sort on only thousands of data. Now the same merge sort has got to be deployed on lakhs of data, right? Obviously, not to accommodate that lack of data, we are going to have a huge memory. The moment the search space is used, obviously search takes longer time. In order to reduce the search space, I think of certain edge computing so that this merge sort will be supported by smaller sort algorithms, right? So individually parallelly working. So go with parallel computation. Redesign the merge sort, bring in some parallelism into that, right? So that's how we can think of tackling the problem. Look, we have been talking about classification problem, clustering problem, right? For the last 40 years, when I started my master's degree, I learned classification, same Bayesian classification, support vector mission. Still, we are using support vector mission. But today, why deep learning is really dominating and it has become such a powerful tool for machine learning application. The one is its beauty in learning even features automatically. And number two, basically the machine learning problem is a searching problem. Searching for what? Searching for a better mapping function which establishes a kind of mapping from input space to the output space. So there could be possibly many mapping. But the search space, the space where I have to look for the possible solution is really good. In classical machine learning, this space is restricted to only a few. But whereas in case of deep learning, because we are allowing the system to learn huge number of parameters, obviously it works in higher dimensional feature space. And because it works in higher dimensional feature space, the possibility that it includes actual optimal solution is high. When the probability of having optimal solution in our merge space is high, obviously I end up with such a possible optimal solution. Look, that's what I mean.
We need algorithms. We need to parallelize the algorithms.
Not only parallel
and exploiting the inherent parallelism in the architecture itself.
Correct. One is architecture parallelism. Another one is improving the feature space. Right? Dimension of the feature space. Obviously.
Right.
So split and angle, divide and rule, divide and conquer. Yeah. Okay, effective strategy. This is what I mean. Edge computing is really mattering. Edge computing is really. Suppose if these organizers want to know whether all 800 participants were really alert while Dr. Guru was speaking, they are supposed to get the videos right and look at their individual videos. That's really tough. Instead of that, can you do certain edge computing on the respective computer itself so that computer will identify only those people who just have logged in and went off, right? There is a camera, allow the video processing, but let that system not to send the video, but to do certain edge computing and send only the required information, right? And that edge computing operation is really of great demand today to take up our approaches to scalability.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I take this opportunity to thank Professor Nagabhushan, Professor Basuraj Gadge, Professor Guru and Professor Shubhangi and Professor Kulkarni for giving me an opportunity to interact with all of you. And now I think there are some more questions and I leave the coordinator to pick up some questions from the audience.
Fine, for me?
Dr. Javed.
Javed, questions for me? Fine.
Yes, sir. So there are, sir, there is one comment in YouTube, sir, which I want to share because it is not visible in this Google Meet.
Okay,
So
you
someone
read
is
it.
saying,
Read it. Read it.
Nagendra Swami sir is saying that DSG is equal to data structure guru.
Yeah, generally my students call my name as data structure. DS.
Data, G stands for data structure guru. So there is one more question here, like, sir, how to deal with NP hard problems?
Sir, there's nothing like how to deal with NP-hard problem, because however you deal with it, they continue to be NP-hard only, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we cannot think of perfect way of solving them. We can think of, a kind of approximate solution to them, right? If I don't get into what I really want, I don't mind if I get into something closer to it, right? Then what really matters is only a approximation solution, right? Approximation algorithms. Right, we have to use some soft computing nowadays, right? It all depends on the domain of your application. What do you really want to solve? Then think of suitable approximation algorithm.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, there is one more question. Sir, there is one more question from Sandeep Mandarwadkar. Result of set operation is another set. What a conclusion, sir. So he's telling that, sir, can you give some input on this one?
So
result of set operation is another set.
I have a domain called set of sets, for example. Imagine all sets and put them as members of the one set, universal set. That set S consists all possible sets. Take any two elements, or you can imagine set of integers, right? Set of all integers, including negative, 0, positive, all are integers. Take any two integers, add integers. When you add those integers, it gives rise to another integer, right? I mean, this is called closure operation. I mean, integer domain is closed under addition. Integer domain is closed under multiplication. Now I want to multiply two parameters. Let's say star operation on left operand and a right operand. What can be this left operand? That left operand can be another operation like a plus b. A plus b into, let's say, d. So a plus b, if it happens to be, if this star is defined to be under integer domain, unless this a plus b give rise to another integer, I cannot do this star operation. Hope you are understanding now. So a plus b turns out to be another integer, and because of that, nesting of operation is possible. In case of SQL, when you do operations using SQL on relations, the output of that SQL operation is another table, so that can be taken as input for the next SQL operation. That is the beauty of set theoretical based relational model, which was recommended by E.F. Cohn in 1970. I remember that year because it is my birth year. Right? So 1970 was my year of birth. So in doing that, 1970, E.F. Cohn published a wonderful paper in IBM journal that, why do you think of pointer based relationship existing among entity types in a database? Can you think of representing every piece of information in the form of a set or in the form of a relation? What is a relation? A subset of Cartesian product of two or many domains, right? The moment you give them a set representation, operations on set like union give rise to another set, intersection give rise to another set, Cartesian product give rise to another set, and because the operation give rise to another set, I can define another operation on the output. So you can take output of one operation, give as input for the next operation, you take the output. I mean, such a nesting, cascading of queries is possible. You need not have to record them temporarily, right?
Sir, one more last question, sir.
No more questions. No more questions. Now time is up. The questions may be diverted to Professor Guru and also diverted to the panelists. Okay? No more questions. Time should be very strictly observed. 12 o'clock is the next session.
Okay, sir.
I appreciate, and I'm really 2 seconds. I'm really grateful to VPU, the organizers of this FDP program, with a special acknowledgement and thanks to my mentor, Mr. Nagbhushan, for having extended me an invitation to be a part of this and give my little experience on data structure and algorithm, the philosophy. Thank you, one and all. Thank you very much.
It was very excellent, Dr. Guru. It was very good experience which you have put forward. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Guru, and Professor P.S. Hiramat sir for handling the session. Nagushan sir.
Please tell me.
Nagushan sir.
Yes.
Sir, when can we start the next session?
No,
Can we start at
12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. Because it is 12 o'clock. It gets started at 12 o'clock. It is 11:55. 12 o'clock it gets started.
We can start at 12 o'clock.
Yes, sure, certainly.
Okay.
Give 5 minutes time for people to log in. That's all.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, participants. And
Sir, the next session link will be shared shortly.
session.
Already.
Kindly join by clicking the second session link.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.